다이어트 할 때 혹시 이런 조언 들어보신 적 있나요? 허기가 심해지지 않도록 식사 사이에 간식을 먹어야 해요. 그렇게 해야 과식을 피할 수 있어요. 만약 이렇게 조언하는 전문가가 있다면 믿고 거르셔도 됩니다. 실제로 다이어트를 한 번이라도 해봤다면 절대로 그렇게 조언할 수 없을 것입니다. 다이어트 할 때 먹는 간식에 대해 제이슨펑 박사는 이렇게 이야기합니다.
One of the things that has really changed in the last 40 years is the increased snacking that we see in our society. In the 1970s, people just didn't snack much. It just wasn't something that was encouraged. By the time we get into the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, it's really been ingrained as a so-called healthy habit. But is it really all that healthy? In fact, the science says it's not. One of the things that the studies consistently show is that when you eat more frequently, you're going to eat more overall. And it just makes sense. I mean, think about it for a second. If you eat a proper lunch and then after school or during work you have a donut, does that really dull your appetite at dinner time? Do you really eat less? Probably not. You probably would have eaten the same amount at dinner if you ate that muffin or granola bar or donut anyway. So overall, you're just eating more calories. You're keeping your insulin high, which is keeping your body in that fat storing mode. So if we look at the studies, we can look at the NHANES studies, which are these large national surveys of Americans, and they do these every number of years. So from 1970 to 2006, we can see the change in the habits of Americans, regular Americans, and how often they're eating and the prevalence of snacking. And what this study really makes clear is that snacking has really become completely ubiquitous in our society. Nobody really believes in eating 3 meals a day at all. If you look at 1977, about 71% of Americans were snacking, and by the time you get to 2003 to 2006, it increases to 97%. Of Americans would have a snack. This is associated with an increased overall caloric intake. The snacking went from 18% of calories to 24% of calories. So in fact, perhaps you do eat slightly less at mealtime, but it's not nearly enough to offset the number of calories that are coming from the snack itself. The other thing is that the snacking in these studies is very, very energy dense. That is, they're not vegetables and fruits which fill you up without giving you a lot of calories. They tend to be very, very concentrated sources of calories. And therefore, you're gonna get that problem where you're going to eat more just because you're only eating a tiny bit, and because it's so energy dense, you're getting a lot of calories. The bottom line is that eating more frequently is generally going to lead to eating more, and that's not really conducive to weight loss, no matter what you believe in. And this is really the same data you see with skipping breakfast. It's no different. So when we look at data on people who skip breakfast, such as these NHANES surveys, what they show is that on average, when you have people who are randomly assigned to skipping breakfast, they tend to eat about 270 calories less in that overall day compared to those people who eat a regular breakfast. So eating more frequently means that you're going to eat more overall. If you eat fewer times overall, well, you'll eat slightly more at that meal time, but you're going to overall throughout the day eat less.
아직도 많은 전문가들이 적당량의 간식은 공복감을 없애서 다이어트에 도움이 된다고 말합니다. 이런 말은 논리적으로는 그럴싸하게 들리지만 현실에서는 잘 통하지 않습니다. 이미 제이슨펑 박사가 연구 결과를 통해 입증했지만 당장 여러분의 실제 경험을 떠올려 보세요. 오후 4시에 달달한 초콜릿 몇 조각 먹었다고 해서 저녁에 먹는 양이 줄어드나요? 아닐 것입니다. 반대의 경우도 마찬가지입니다. 아침을 걸렀다고 해서 점심을 평소보다 2배로 먹을 수 있나요? 그럴 수 없을 거예요. 간식을 먹음으로써 과식을 조절한다는 건 실제로는 절대 통하지 않는 잘못된 다이어트 상식입니다.
So there's three key reasons why snacking is really one of the cardinal sins in weight loss. One is that when you're eating all the time, you're going to make yourself hungrier. And if you think about the amount that you eat at meal times, it really depends on how hungry you are. The hungrier you are, the more you're going to eat. It's really as simple as that. And the thing is that something that stimulates your appetite is going to make you eat more. Well, what are these appetizers? Well, they're small portions of very delicious foods that stimulate us to want to eat. Well, that's what a snack is. It's a small portion of a very appetizing, delicious looking food that is going to get us in the mood for eating. So why would we want to increase our hunger levels day in and day out? That's not a good strategy.
저는 이 이야기를 들으면서 어린 시절이 떠올랐습니다. 학창 시절 저는 눈을 뜨면 바로 식탁으로 가서 아침을 먹었습니다. 점심시간은 12시였지만 저를 포함한 많은 친구들은 그때까지 기다리지 못하고 도시락을 까먹었습니다. 식사한 지 2-3시간밖에 지나지 않았는데도 말이죠. 지금 되돌아보면 탄수화물 위주의 아침 식사가 혈당 스파이크를 일으켰기 때문에 식욕을 더 자극했던 것 같습니다. 즉 배고픔은 에너지가 필요하다는 신호가 아닐 때도 있다는 것입니다. 그러니 살짝 허기가 진다고 당 떨어졌다고 간식을 먹지 않아도 됩니다. 그 간식은 허기를 채우기는커녕 식욕을 더 자극합니다. 배고픔에 그렇게 민감하게 반응하지 않아도 우리 몸은 저장되어 있던 에너지를 활용해 알아서 잘 돌아갑니다.
The second key reason why snacks are really, really bad for you is that they often are highly processed foods. And the reason is that if you're eating 6 times a day, chances are that you're not going to want to take out a piece of fish, put it on the grill, and grill yourself a small piece of tuna, and then have to clean it up and so on. So instead, what you do is you reach for that processed or ultra-processed food, often with a lot of refined grains and refined sugar because they tend to be shelf-stable, so they don't have to be refrigerated, like cookies, like brownies, like baked goods, like granola bars, those sort of things. And they tend to be ultra-processed. So if you're eating a lot of ultra-processed foods, that is, you're switching out by eating snacks, you're switching out eating more beef or fish or vegetables and eating more cookies and brownies and crackers and that sort of thing, well, that's not a good switch. So if you look at the NHANES data, again, up to 2014, what you see is that the snacks are overwhelmingly not fruit, vegetables, or meat and fish. But instead, what you see are a high prevalence of salty snacks, so things such as pretzels and chips, which of course are not very good for you. And even more prevalent are the dessert type foods, things like cupcakes and donuts and brownies and so on. So when we're talking about snacks, you're really not making a good food switch here by eating the donut instead of eating that grilled salmon on salad, for example.
이 부분에 대해서 나는 간식으로 야채, 견과류 등 건강에 좋은 음식을 먹는다 라고 하시는 분들도 계실 것 같습니다. 물론 건강한 간식이 가공식품보다 훨씬 나은 선택인 건 맞습니다. 하지만 여전히 다이어트를 하는 관점에서 보면 무엇이든 자주 입에 넣는 것이 바람직해 보이지는 않습니다. 제이슨펑 박사는 이전 영상에서 먹는 양, 음식의 종류, 먹는 횟수 3가지가 모두 체중 감소에 영향을 미친다고 했습니다. 따라서 건강에 좋은 음식도 자주 먹으면 다이어트에 방해가 될 수 있습니다.
So the third thing that really makes snacking one of the cardinal sins of weight loss is that if you're not hungry, why are you eating? It's not a winning strategy. Think about this for a second. If you want to lose weight and you decide that you need to eat 6-8 times a day, the whole day, you're going to be thinking about foods. What foods am I going to eat? What foods can't I eat? What should I do about the snack that's coming up? Because 6-8 times a day, it's constant. And yet that was the standard advice for weight loss, is to make yourself think about food all the time. Wouldn't it be better if you took your mind off of the food? For example, if you went and did something like some home renovation project, you started doing some gardening or something, you did a jigsaw puzzle, you did some paint by numbers, you got so engrossed in it that you didn't eat. Well, if you don't eat, then your body's going to start burning some of the calories that is stored away, which is called body fat. Well, wouldn't that be better? You're not thinking about the food, so you're not hungry, you're not appetizing yourself by stimulating your appetite, and you've let your body burn off the body fat, which, as we've mentioned before, is just a store of food calories.
저 또한 과거에는 조금씩 자주 먹는 방식으로 다이어트를 했으며 회원들에게도 그렇게 하라고 지도했었습니다. 이 방법의 또 다른 문제점은 엄청난 자제력과 준비성을 요구하기 때문에 지속하기 어렵다는 점입니다. 왜냐하면 간식은 조금 먹어야 간식인 건데 먹다 보면 도중에 멈추기가 쉽지 않습니다. 앞에서 말씀드렸다시피 간식은 허기를 달래는 역할보다는 에피타이저로서의 효과가 크기 때문입니다. 설령 계획한 양만 먹는데 성공했다 해도 그 뒤에 금방 따라오는 허기짐을 꾹 참아야만 합니다. 생활에도 매우 큰 불편함이 따르는데요. 언제나 음식을 챙겨야 하기 때문이죠. 이런 문제들은 지속 가능성을 크게 떨어뜨리는 요인이 됩니다. 간헐적 단식의 개념을 이해하고 나서는 식사 횟수를 줄였지만 그 대신 충분히 포만감을 느낄 때까지 먹습니다. 예전에는 다이어트 할 때 배부르게 먹는 게 큰 잘못으로 느껴졌지만 먹는 횟수를 줄이면 그렇게 만족스럽지 않은 식사를 하지 않아도 됩니다. 그리고 이제는 한 번씩 찾아오는 허기짐을 매번 챙길 필요가 없다는 것을 잘 알고 있습니다. 우리 몸에는 며칠을 굶어도 될 만큼 충분한 에너지가 저장되어 있으며 우리들에게는 그것을 알아서 꺼냈을 수 있는 능력이 있습니다.
So, for those three key reasons, the whole snacking idea that you should eat 6 times a day or 8 times a day, it really just falls apart. First, it's going to stimulate your appetite constantly. Second, you're going to eat a high amount of ultra-processed foods. And by doing this, you're going to tend to increase the overall number of calories through the day. And 3, you're making yourself obsess about the foods that you have to eat rather than doing something enjoyable and letting your body handle it. So, bottom line here is that the fewer number of times you eat, the better. And this is something that people have understood for decades. In fact, most people up until the 1990s ate 3 times a day. Like, we were busy. We had other things to do. We couldn't just think about eating all the time. We had to work. We had to go to school. We had to study. We had to go in the garden. We had to fix our house. We had to look after the kids. All of those things meant that, hey, we don't have time to think about what to have for snack. Like, forget about it. Your body will take care of itself. And that's the thing. Why did we believe that snacking, which is such a recent addition to the way that we eat and was associated with increased amounts of eating and increased obesity, why would we think it's such a healthy thing? In fact, it was never based in science. And the key is that our bodies knows what to do when there's no food coming in our mouths. We have stored food, so let's use it. In conclusion, what I'm saying is that you have to be aware of the cardinal sin of weight loss, which is there's really no such thing as a healthy snack. You have to go back to the traditional ways of eating, and the traditional ways of eating are generally meal times. Don't eat outside of a table. Eat with somebody. Don't eat snacks. Don't eat in front of the TV. Don't eat late at night. And once in a while, you could do some fasting as well. That's the traditional way to eat. And guess what? Millions and millions of people have done it. And without even actually thinking about it, they were able to stay relatively thin and avoid these metabolic diseases. But you can't eat all the time.
이상한 다이어트였습니다.